In 1988, Iranian man Mehran Karimi Nassiri was traveling to the UK when his briefcase containing essential refugee documents was stolen from him at a Paris train station. Unable to prove his identity to British immigration officials, Nassiri was returned to France and found himself completely stranded in Terminal 1 of Paris's main airport. He remained there for an astonishing 18 years, during which he became a fixture in the terminal, residing on a red bench surrounded by his belongings, writing in his diary, and engaging with airport staff and travelers. In 2006, Nassiri was hospitalized, finally ending his long stay at the airport. He later lived in a Paris shelter before returning to the airport in 2022, where he would spend his final days before dying of a heart attack in the same terminal. His unique situation inspired several works, most notably the 2004 film The Terminal, directed by Steven Spielberg and starring Tom Hanks. Morbid Facts, Part 577. On a cold winter night in 1977, 48-year-old Teresita Basso was found brutally murdered in her Chicago apartment. Her body had been left naked under a burning mattress with a knife still embedded in her chest. The case quickly went cold with no suspects and no apparent motive, until months later when police received a chilling phone call. A local man claimed that his wife, who had worked with Teresita, began channeling messages from Teresita's ghost during trance-like states. During these eerie episodes, the woman would apparently speak in Teresita's voice, identifying her killer as a man named Alan Showery. Even more disturbingly, the alleged spirit named stolen items that were taken from her apartment, including specific pieces of jewelry that Showery had stolen from her. As absurd as it sounded, police followed these clues, and shockingly, they all checked out. Showery was arrested and eventually confessed, making this one of the most bizarre criminal cases in modern history. Morbid Facts, Part 527. A woman from Turkey recently underwent surgery to have 35 olive pits, 28 date seeds, and 5 stones removed from her digestive tract. She was experiencing severe abdominal pain, leading to the discovery that she'd been swallowing various pits and seeds for decades. After narrowly avoiding death due to the complications, she's now vocal about urging people to never swallow large seeds. In the weeks leading up to D-Day, General Eisenhower was under so much stress that he'd been smoking 6 packs of cigarettes, drinking 24 cups of coffee, and averaging just 2 hours of sleep every day. In the 1950s, 3 campers were found dead at their campsite in Oregon without any sign of struggle. Investigators were stumped until they soon found a dead newt in the hunter's coffee pot. They likely died after drinking the coffee, since newts can produce a toxin that's 10,000 times more potent than cyanide. Ancient Greek lawmaker Charondas issued a law stating that anyone who brought weapons into the Athenian assembly would be executed. One day after hunting in the countryside, he entered the assembly without knowing that his hunting knife was still attached to his belt. He then promptly took his own life to uphold his own law. Just last year, Nicolas Cage's son Weston was arrested after reportedly assaulting his mother, Christina Fulton. The woman says she rushed to Weston after hearing he set his apartment on fire. But upon her arrival, her furious son snapped, violently pulling her into an elevator by her hair before crushing and suffocating her. Fulton testified, "He shoved his thumb into my eye socket. The pain was excruciating. My vision went black. I was losing consciousness." She credited one of Weston's friends with potentially saving her life by intervening before the attack got too ugly. Weston was recently ordered to complete a 2-year mental health diversion program instead of serving prison time. In 2007, a man named Shannon Wisnant bought a storage unit at an auction in North Carolina, only to find a severed human leg when he opened the grill inside. He reported this to authorities, but soon decided he wanted to keep the leg and turn it into a money-making Halloween display for adults and children to pay to see. However, the man who the limb once belonged to caught wind of the story and said it was his own amputated leg that he lost in a plane crash and wanted to be buried with someday. After a long custody battle, the leg was eventually returned to its original owner. Morbid Facts, Part 459. In 2014, author Richard Britton traveled 500 miles to find a teenage girl who left him a bad review on his recent book, then smashed a wine bottle over her head, sending her to the hospital where she nearly died. Richard was jailed for 30 months following the vicious attack. In 1971, 46-year-old New Jersey accountant John List lost his job at a bank and couldn't stand to tell his family. After a failed job search, List worried that his family would turn away from God due to a lack of stability and therefore miss out on heaven. So he felt he was left with no choice but to murder his entire family and disappear forever. He killed his wife, mother, and 3 children by gunshot before vanishing for the next 18 years. List had planned out the murder so meticulously that nearly a month had passed before anyone suspected that something was wrong. He assumed a new identity in Denver, remarried, and evaded capture for nearly 2 decades, until a neighbor finally recognized him after seeing him on America's Most Wanted. Here are some morbid facts about Keanu Reeves. Keanu was set up for a bumpy ride from the start, as his drug addict father bailed on his family when Reeves was just 3 years old, leaving his mom to jump from marriage to marriage while giving young Keanu zero sense of stability. Keanu had his first taste of tragedy when his best friend River Phoenix died of a drug overdose in 1993. The two had co-starred in My Private Idaho just 2 years prior and had become very close with one another on and off set. A few years later, when the actor was filming for The Matrix, his daughter was stillborn at 8 months. The tragedy caused he and his girlfriend to briefly break up just before she was killed in a car crash. Since then, he's donated most of his earnings from movies to charities and has avoided having kids. Keanu's sister Kim was diagnosed with the deadly blood cancer leukemia in 1991. In response, he sold his home to move closer to her, cleaned her house, cooked her meals, and prepared all of her necessary medications. Once she recovered, Keanu started a private charity to fund cancer research in children's hospitals. In 2009, he was interviewed saying, "I don't like to attach my name to it. I just let the foundation do what it does." A 27-year-old beauty queen from Kosovo has reportedly died after attempting to flee from police. Güler Erdogan allegedly tried driving home while drunk until she ran into a police checkpoint. After a breathalyzer recorded her BAC as 3 times the legal limit, she decided to flee from the scene on foot, fearing that her modeling career was over. She ran over to the edge of the overpass and reportedly fell over by accident, plummeting 50 feet onto the 6-lane motorway below before she was fatally struck by a car. In 2012, a woman from South Carolina discovered that her ex-boyfriend of 12 years had been secretly living in her attic for several weeks. She'd been hearing strange noises and nails dropping from the ceiling of her bedroom, before eventually sending her nephew to investigate, who found the man sleeping on the attic's heating unit. The ex-boyfriend had also rigged the ceiling vents to apparently look into the woman's bedroom from above. Upon discovery, he fled the scene before police arrived but was later apprehended. Morbid Facts, Part 481. Russian scientist Anatoly Bugorsky worked as a physicist on the largest particle accelerator in the Soviet Union. In 1978, he was checking a malfunctioning piece of equipment when one of the safety mechanisms failed, causing a high-energy proton beam to pass directly through his head. He reportedly saw a flash brighter than 1,000 suns, but didn't feel any pain. The beam had burned through parts of his skin, bone, and the brain tissue underneath, causing the left half of his face to swell up beyond recognition. Since it was believed that he received far more than a fatal dose of radiation, Bugorsky was taken to a clinic in Moscow where doctors could document his certain death. But miraculously, Bugorsky survived, completed his PhD, and continued working as a particle physicist. Nearly 50 years later, he's still alive to this day with relatively minor symptoms. This is the skull of a young girl whose remains were found in the trash deposit of a Jamestown fort building in 2013. As evidenced by the butchery marks seen on her forehead, she was believed to be the victim of cannibalism at the Jonestown colony in the winter of 1609. Known as the Starving Time, this period was marked by extreme desperation when it came to finding food due to a severe drought. The governor of Jamestown, George Percy, wrote that colonists ate horses, dogs, cats, vermin, and even dug up corpses from graves to consume. In one case, he reported that a man killed his pregnant wife, butchered her, preserved her with salt, and consumed her. Only 61 out of the original 500 colonists managed to survive the brutal winter. Morbid Facts, Part 418. In 2004, a deranged fan rushed the stage during the first song at a Pantera concert and fatally shot legendary guitarist Dimebag Darrell multiple times with a pistol. He then killed 3 others attempting to subdue him while injuring 3 more before being shot in the head by an officer. The killer's motive remains unclear to this day. During a live firing demonstration in 1942, a Royal Air Force pilot accidentally opened fire on a crowd of spectators. 25 British soldiers were killed while another 71 were wounded after being mistaken for dummies. After his floppy trouser snake was torn off in a car accident when he was 6 years old, 43-year-old Mohammed Abad received a fully functional bionic 8-inch pecker. It was constructed over a 3-year period using skin grafts, and is complete with a mechanical interior and a fluid pouch to give him erections at the press of a button. According to the surgeons involved, its function is still complete enough for Abad to be able to father a child with his still intact right nut. When Pope Pius died, his embalming was so poorly botched that his body began to rot and bloat almost immediately. During the public viewing, his nose fell off, and his body reportedly exploded from the gas buildup inside of the casket due to blistering heat. After being killed in a shootout in 1911, outlaw Elmer McCurdy's embalmed body was mummified and passed around as a carnival sideshow prop for more than 60 years. His corpse was finally identified in 1976, when a TV crew realized that the mannequin was actually a human body. In 2007, a 53-year-old woman died from a stroke, and her organs, both kidneys, lungs, and her liver, were donated to 4 different patients. Over the following months and years, all 4 recipients developed breast cancer, from which 3 of them ended up dying despite treatment. It was later found that the donor had breast cancer that hadn't been discovered at the time of her death. The only survivor had their donated kidney removed early before the cancer could spread. Doctors have said this was an extremely rare case that shouldn't deter anyone from receiving donated organs. Morbid Facts, Part 339. In 2007, Navy SEAL Mike Day was shot 27 times by 4 members of Al-Qaeda before being knocked out by a grenade. Not only did he survive, but Mike even ended up killing all 4 of the militants and walked away on his own after regaining consciousness. Jeremiah Clarke was a British composer who couldn't decide whether to take his own life by drowning or hanging himself, so he flipped a coin. The coin landed on its edge in the mud, so he went home and shot himself instead. Squeezing someone's testicles very tightly can have roughly the same effect as using an EpiPen, but I wouldn't suggest doing this because it could also kill them. Your body is the weakest from 3 to 4 a.m., making this the time when most people die in their sleep. Dutchman Dirk Willems was a religious prisoner who escaped his execution in 1569. When the guard chasing him fell through the ice in a nearby river, Willems turned around to save him. He was then recaptured and burned at the stake. Morbid Facts, Part 313. After Star Wars The Phantom Menace was released in 1999, Jar Jar Binks quickly became the most hated character in the franchise. The backlash was so devastating for Ahmed Best, the actor who played him, that he nearly took his own life. The first chainsaw was invented by 2 Scottish doctors in the year 1780. It was originally used to help open up the pelvis during childbirth. In 1958 North Carolina, a white girl told her parents that she kissed 2 black boys aged 9 and 7 on the cheeks. The girl's father then arranged a mob to go to the boys' homes where they threatened to lynch them and their parents. Soon enough, police showed up where they proceeded to arrest and severely beat the young boys. Charged with rape, they were placed in jail for 6 days without being allowed any contact with their parents. They were detained for nearly 4 months before finally being pardoned by the governor. It's infamously known as the kissing case of 1958. Lee Redmond held the world record for the longest fingernails at 28 feet in total length after growing them out for more than 30 years. She said she had to sleep in a special uncomfortable position and couldn't drive because of them. But she eventually lost them after she was ejected from the passenger seat in a 4-car pileup that resulted in serious injuries. For 60 years, an unknown figure dressed in black visited Edgar Allan Poe's grave on his birthday, January 19th. Starting in the 1930s, he would pour himself a glass of cognac and raise a toast in front of the grave, before leaving behind 3 roses and the unfinished bottle of cognac. The man never spoke and was never identified. In 1942, forest rangers discovered something disturbingly odd at a lake located high in the Himalayas. There were over 200 ancient skeletons with blunt force trauma to their skulls, but the strangest part was that they were from distinct populations that died about 1,000 years apart. Researchers say the lake may have served as a recurring death trap over the centuries, with many likely dying from sudden hailstorms, which explains the cracked skulls. Many of the skeletons can still be seen emerging from the thawing ice in the summer, some with their hair and flesh still intact. Morbid Facts, Part 391. After the divorce of his parents, Jack Black got mixed in with the wrong crowd and became severely addicted to cocaine at the young age of 14. It got so bad that he would steal money from his mom to fuel his addiction, but was eventually able to kick the habit after switching schools. Jack also lost his gay older brother Howard to AIDS at the height of the epidemic in 1989. In 2009, an Italian brain surgeon was having a heart attack in the middle of performing a delicate operation. But instead of getting treatment, he powered through the surgery upon realizing that his patient may have died if he stopped, and both made a full recovery. In 2009, U.S. Marine Brian Dennis was stationed in Iraq when he met a stray desert dog named Nubs. After someone brutally stabbed the dog with a screwdriver, the Marine nursed him back to health despite expecting him to die. They developed such a strong bond that when the unit left, Nubs picked up Brian's scent and trekked 70 miles through an active desert war zone to be with him. Dennis soon shipped the dog to his home in San Diego, and the two have been best friends ever since. Bubble Boy David Vetter was born with a severe immunity disorder where he basically had no immune system at all, meaning even the most harmless germs could easily end up killing him. Because of this, he spent his entire life inside of a bubble and could only receive air, water, and food if it had been sterilized first. At age 12, David received a bone marrow transplant from his sister, the only treatment available that would allow him outside of his bubble. But the marrow sadly contained traces of a dormant virus, and David passed away a few months later. Kidam Cave in Kenya is believed to be the original source of Ebola and Marburg, two of the deadliest diseases known to man. A 2007 expedition found evidence that the vector species was most likely the African fruit bat, or more specifically, their guano. Either way, the cave is known to scientists as one of the most dangerous places on the planet. In 1966, a teenage boy was flying a kite in Brazil when he stumbled upon two dead bodies lying in the grass. Later identified as electronics technicians, the men were wearing matching formal suits, raincoats, and most bizarrely, homemade lead masks covering their eyes. One of them had a note in his pocket that read, "Be at the agreed place at 4:30. Take capsules after the effect. Protect metals. Await signal." There were no signs of violence, and no clear cause of death was ever determined. The capsules were never found, and toxicology reports proved inconclusive due to organ decomposition. The men had been seen acting nervous and paranoid in the days leading up to their deaths, while reportedly measuring distances in the hills and carrying around a notebook filled with strange codes and symbols. Their families later stated that the men had been obsessively studying obscure books on alchemy, spiritualism, and intense luminosity experiments. Their bizarre deaths remain a total mystery to this day. Here are some morbidly wholesome facts about dogs. On 9/11, a guide dog named Roselle led a group of people, including her blind owner, down 78 flights of stairs before the North Tower collapsed. She stopped only once to give kisses to a woman who was having a panic attack. In Japan in the 1920s, Hachiko the Akita became famous for meeting his owner every day at the railroad station. Even after his owner died, he continued to make the same journey every single day for 9 straight years. In 2014, 3-year-old Karina Chikatova survived in the Siberian wilderness for 11 days with no one except her dog. She ate wild berries, drank from a river, and curled up with her dog for warmth. She was saved when her dog managed to find her village and guide rescuers toward her. During the California Tubbs fire in 2017, a guard dog named Odin refused to leave his flock of goats behind while his owners fled to safety. Days later, the owners returned to their decimated property to find Odin and all of the goats still alive. Here's some morbid facts about Marky Mark Wahlberg. Mark Wahlberg was addicted to cocaine by the age of 13 and had committed at least 20 criminal offenses by the time he turned 21. In 1986, a 15-year-old Wahlberg and 3 friends chased after 3 black kids while yelling, "Kill the N-word," and throwing rocks at them. In 1988, Mark was arrested for the unprovoked racist attack on 2 Vietnamese Americans, leaving one of the victims blind. Marky Mark was initially charged with attempted murder, but only ended up serving 45 days in prison since he was only 16. Seth MacFarlane and Mark Wahlberg were both booked to fly on American Airlines Flight 11, the first plane that crashed into the World Trade Center on 9/11. Wahlberg decided last minute to fly to Toronto instead, while MacFarlane missed the flight by 10 minutes due to a hangover. Both have said they've had countless dreams of the scenario in which they got on that plane. Wahlberg received criticism when he was once quoted saying, "If I was on that plane with my kids, it wouldn't have went down the way it did." There would have been a lot of blood in the first-class cabin, and then me saying, "Okay, we're going to land somewhere safely, don't worry." Wahlberg later apologized for these rash comments. In 2022, a 25-year-old woman named Sharaban wanted to escape personal and family issues in her life. So she devised a crazy plan to fake her own death and search social media for lookalikes, eventually stumbling upon a German beauty influencer named Khadija who closely resembled her. After promising the model free beauty treatments, Sharaban kidnapped her and stabbed her 56 times before leaving the body in her car, attempting to pass it off as her own. The influencer was initially misidentified as Sharaban until DNA testing revealed the disturbing truth, as her horrific plan resulted in life in prison. Australian woman Noella Rukunko became famous in 2015 after crashing her own funeral. She was presumed dead after her husband paid several hitmen to kill her upon wrongly suspecting that she was cheating on him. But instead, the hitmen spared her life since they knew her brother and refused to kill women or children. They revealed her husband's plot to her before providing all the evidence and helping her fake her own death. Days later, Noella walked into her own funeral that was organized by her husband, causing him to faint on the spot. He was later arrested, confessed to the crime, and sentenced to 9 years in prison for incitement to murder. Morbid Facts, Part 510. Ariana Grande reportedly has a longtime stalker named Paige Neiman who tries to impersonate the famous singer. She's been obsessed with Grande since she was 12 years old and has allegedly undergone several plastic surgeries to look like her despite being only 20 years old. When the Titanic sank, the richest passenger on board was business mogul John Jacob Astor IV, who had enough money in his bank account to build 30 Titanics. He ended up giving up his spot in the final lifeboat to instead save the lives of a random woman and her daughter. These were the last photos of Garrett Miller, taken just minutes before a soccer goalpost tipped over and struck him in the head, killing him instantly. In 2013, a family dog named Killian was protecting a baby boy from an abusive babysitter by standing between them and growling at her. This made the boy's parents suspicious of the babysitter, so they hid a recording device under the couch and heard her swearing at the baby while possibly shaking and slapping him. The sitter eventually pleaded guilty to assault and battery of a child and was sentenced to 3 years in prison. The most morbid facts of all time, Part 3. JFK's little sister Rosemary suffered from mood swings throughout her childhood. Fearing that she would end up embarrassing the Kennedy name, her father arranged for her to receive one of the first lobotomies when she was 23, and the surgery was completely botched. Doctors asked her to sing "God Bless America" while they sliced away at her brain with a tool that looked like a butter knife, and they stopped the surgery when she became incoherent. It left Rosemary completely incapacitated and unable to walk or speak until her death in 2005. Born in 1661, King Charles II of Spain was the product of 200 years of inbreeding that intended to strengthen the family line. He was breastfed until the age of 4 and never fully learned how to walk. As an adult, he was completely illiterate and could barely chew or speak due to his deformed jaw and enlarged tongue. He was so ugly and disfigured that his own wife was terrified of him. His autopsy revealed some rather disturbing findings, stating that his heart was the size of a peppercorn, his lungs corroded, his intestines rotten and gangrenous. He had a single testicle black as coal, and his head was full of water. As part of a 1974 art performance, artist Marina Abramovich told visitors she wouldn't move for 6 hours no matter what they did to her. She placed 72 items on a table and invited people to use them on her however they pleased with no punishment. There were objects for pleasure, including a rose, perfume, and wine, as well as objects for pain, including scissors, a whip, and a loaded gun. Visitors were gentle to begin with, but gradually got more aggressive as they became comfortable. Within 3 hours, all of her clothes had been completely cut off, and some people even started slicing her skin. She was sexually assaulted various times and had rose thorns stuck in her abdomen. One person even held the gun to her head until someone else took it away. Once the performance was over 6 hours later, the crowd scampered like mice to avoid an actual confrontation. Afterwards, Abramovich said, "If you leave it up to the audience, they can kill you." In a resurfaced video from 2016, Cardi B casually confessed to drugging and robbing men during her stripping days, luring them to hotel rooms under the guise of sex, then stealing from them once they were unconscious. No victims ever came forward, leading many to believe they were either too ashamed, unaware, or unable to remember what happened. Cardi later defended herself by saying she did what she had to do to survive and that she would do it again without regret. The confession drew widespread outrage in comparisons to infamous cases of sexual exploitation. Yet despite her disturbing admission, no charges were ever filed and her career continues to thrive. In October of 2023, a hunter stumbled upon the remains of a missing man deep in the mountains of Colorado. Lying faithfully beside him was his white Jack Russell Terrier, Finny, having somehow survived the unforgiving wilderness for months, refusing to leave her owner's side. A grieving daughter from the UK placed her mother's ashes in a bottle along with a touching message before throwing it into the ocean. Her mother had passed away from a heart condition at the young age of 51, never having the chance to fulfill her dream of traveling the world. The bottle was soon found by a family who posted the story online before honoring the heartfelt request. Morbid Facts, Part 637. In 1951, Mary Reeser was found almost entirely burnt to ashes in her armchair, with only her lower leg, backbone, and shrunken skull still remaining, while the rest of her Florida apartment showed very little fire damage. Though many speculated that it was a case of spontaneous human combustion, experts believe that she accidentally ignited herself while smoking and burned under a rare phenomenon known as the wick effect, where her clothing caught fire and her body fat acted like a human candle, fueling a slow, smoldering blaze that consumed her from within. To this day, the case remains one of the most chilling fire deaths ever recorded. In 1761, a French ship carrying 160 Malaysian slaves crashed into the barren Tromelin Island, resulting in 100 of them drowning while shackled below deck. The surviving 60 slaves were forced to build a raft for the fleeing French crew, who promised they'd return but never did. Stranded on a small desolate sandbar with no trees, no fresh water, and no hope, the abandoned slaves endured 15 harrowing years. They scavenged shipwrecked debris for crude shelter and tools, drank rainwater when it fell, hunted seabirds and turtles to stave off starvation, and managed to keep a fire burning despite there being no trees on the island. When rescue finally arrived in 1776, the island held only 7 emaciated women and a single infant. Morbid Facts, Part 547. Just last year, a 23-year-old man died from a catastrophic spinal injury while playing at a Topgolf with some friends. In what was described as a prank gone wrong, his drunken friends had pushed him off the platform, causing him to miss the safety netting and fall 12 feet directly onto his head. In 1990, a flight heading from Medellin, Colombia to New York City crashed onto a hillside after running out of fuel, killing nearly half of the passengers on board. While being treated for serious injuries, 2 of the male passengers were arrested when ER doctors found baggies of cocaine that they'd swallowed and attempted to smuggle. Both men were sentenced to 6 years to life in prison. The British Pet Massacre was a week-long event in 1939 during which an estimated 400,000 cats and dogs, 1/4 of England's pet population, were killed out of fear of them eventually being gassed or left behind during an evacuation. Almost immediately afterwards, the event was recognized as completely unnecessary, stemming from social panic from the impending war and people seeking a way to feel like they were contributing to the war effort. None of the fears that led to the massacre actually ended up materializing. Just last week, 19-year-old Serbian model Tajana Radonjic met a horrifying end during what was supposed to be a scenic parasailing shoot off the coast of Montenegro. Suspended 150 feet in the air above the Adriatic Sea, Tajana began to scream, "Put me down," in terror. Then, in a chilling act, she unbuckled her own harness while still in the air and released herself. Onlookers watched helplessly as her body plunged into the ocean below, likely dying immediately. She had received training just minutes before and showed no obvious signs of distress, making her decision to remove the harness all the more disturbing. Many have speculated that she suffered a sudden panic attack and attempted to ground herself while being disassociated from reality. Her body was recovered from the sea hours later, and parts of the incident were caught on video. Her family has disputed the claim that she panicked or acted irrationally, raising questions about the safety of the harness or if she was given improper instructions. Morbid Facts, Part 629. Hulk Hogan was once a towering 6'7" but has lost up to 5 inches of his height due to his back being fused together after decades of punishing his body in the wrestling ring. Over the past decade alone, he's undergone at least 25 surgeries, including 10 on his back, as well as replacements of both knees and hips and operations on his shoulders and neck. Accordingly, Hogan has described feeling like a human medical experiment and now suffers from brutal chronic pain. About 10,000 Facebook users die every day. It's estimated that by the year 2070, the number of dead profiles will outnumber the living ones, and Facebook will become a digital graveyard. Reclusive siblings Homer and Langley Collier lived in a Harlem townhouse and became notorious for their extreme hoarding. After Homer went blind in the 1930s, Langley quit his job to care for him and began compulsively collecting newspapers and junk, believing that Homer would one day get his sight back and need to catch up on the news. They booby-trapped their home with tunnels of debris to keep people out, eventually withdrawing completely from society. In March of 1947, police discovered Homer's body dead from starvation. Langley had died before him but wasn't found until weeks later due to all the junk in the home. He'd been crushed to death by one of his own traps while trying to bring food to his brother. Morbid Facts, Part 485. In 1994, 13-year-old Texas boy Nicholas Barkley went missing after playing basketball with some friends. 3 years later, he was found in Spain and reunited with his family, but something was very off. The boy who came back had darker hair, brown eyes instead of blue, and a French accent, while looking much older than Nicholas would have been at the time. But perhaps blinded by grief, the Barkley family accepted this boy without question despite these major differences. To be fair, he claimed his kidnappers had taken him to France, dyed his hair, and changed his eye color to hide his identity. But a private investigator would soon reveal the boy's true identity as Frederick Borden, a 23-year-old Frenchman with a history of impersonating missing kids. Borden had apparently been searching for love and affection that he never received as a child. Known as the Chameleon, he's assumed over 500 false identities throughout his life, including those of orphans. Meanwhile, the true fate of Nicholas Barkley remains unknown to this day. Growing up in sunny Burbank, California, Tim Burton often felt out of place, finding comfort and solitude at a cemetery at the end of his street, since it was a lonely and emotional place where no one would bother you. It became a quiet refuge where he could think undisturbed by himself, nurturing an early fascination with the macabre that would later define his unique Gothic style. Burton created the character of Edward Scissorhands to reflect his own feelings of isolation, with the image of a man with scissors for hands symbolizing the pain of wanting to connect with others but being unable to do so without causing harm. Rigor mortis stiffens the muscles after death, but once it wears off, limbs can twitch or shift due to muscle relaxation or gas buildup. These movements can be so startling that morticians have reported bodies appearing to sit up, raise their arms, or even turn their heads. In 1957, 22-year-old rock star Jerry Lee Lewis married his teenage first cousin Myra Gale Brown in Mississippi. At the time, Lewis had still been married to another woman, while Myra Gale was only 13 years old and still believed in Santa Claus. After riding a big wave of success with hits like Great Balls of Fire, the scandalous marriage effectively destroyed Lewis's career. Morbid Facts, Part 627. Carl Alfalfa Switzer, the former child star of Our Gang, was shot and killed in 1959 during a dispute over a cash reward related to a lost hunting dog. After finding and returning the dog, Switzer demanded $50 from the dog's owner, Moses Stiltz, resulting in a heated argument at Stiltz's home. Alfalfa allegedly struck Stiltz with a clock, prompting Stiltz to grab his revolver and shoot Alfalfa in the groin, which he eventually bled out from. While Stiltz claimed self-defense, saying Alfalfa threatened him with a knife, a witness later stated that the actor was leaving when he was shot. Despite conflicting accounts, the killing was ruled justifiable and Stiltz was never charged. In 2005, Kenneth Pinion, a renowned Boeing engineer known online as Mr. Hands, died after engaging in receptive intercourse with a stallion on a Washington farm, an act that was recorded by a friend. The incident caused a fatal perforation in his colon, and he was dropped off at a local hospital where he died shortly afterwards. As a direct result, the state passed a law in 2006 criminalizing both bestiality and the creation of such videos. Morbid Facts, Part 407. Nicknamed the Princess of R&B, popular singer Aaliyah lost her life in a tragic private plane crash when she was just 22 years old. Despite being warned that there was far too much wait for a safe flight, she and her entourage were eager to return home and demanded to leave immediately. Shortly after takeoff, the plane lost its balance and crashed just 200 feet from the runway, killing everyone on board. In 2013, the body of 17-year-old Kendrick Johnson was found inside of a rolled-up gym mat at his Georgia high school. Authorities later concluded that he had become trapped upside down while trying to retrieve his shoes, and eventually died from positional asphyxia. In 2002, schizophrenic British artist Richard Sumner entered a remote forest in Wales. He apparently handcuffed himself to a tree and threw the keys out of reach. His skeleton was found 3 years later, with evidence suggesting he likely regretted his decision. Lady Gaga has publicly shared that when she was 19 years old, she was raped by a music producer who left her pregnant and abandoned after she became badly ill. She's never named the attacker, but recounted that the producer threatened to burn all of her music if she didn't comply with his demands. Gaga later revealed that the trauma led to years of physical suffering and ultimately caused a complete psychotic break. She has never disclosed what happened to the baby. People living within a mile of a golf course have more than twice the odds of developing Parkinson's disease. This is due to continued exposure to certain pesticides, including neurotoxins, which are used to keep fairways and greens well groomed. In 2016, Melissa Ann Blair visited her murderous boyfriend Anthony Powell at the Oregon State Penitentiary and passed him 7 small balloons filled with methamphetamines while kissing him. Powell swallowed the balloons to smuggle them into the prison, but 2 of them ruptured in his stomach, leading to his eventual death from methamphetamine toxicity. Morbid Facts, Part 625. Isaac Hayes, the iconic soul singer who played Chef on South Park, left the show in 2006 under mysterious circumstances. A statement was released in his name, claiming he was against the show's mocking of Scientology, which he practiced. However, creators Trey Parker and Matt Stone were skeptical, noting his prior support for the show's satire of other religions. It turned out that at the time, Hayes had just suffered a debilitating stroke that impaired his ability to communicate, and his son later revealed that Isaac's fellow Scientologists spoke on his behalf while he was incapacitated. South Park responded with the episode The Return of Chef, portraying Chef as brainwashed by a cult before he's brutally killed off. The show's creators assembled Chef's lines by splicing together audio clips from previous episodes.
No, Chef, they filled your head with lies. Can't you see that?
Get the hell out of here!
Hayes tragically died in 2008 after being found unconscious next to a running treadmill, the result of another stroke. Morbid Facts, Part 452. After just one date with him in 2018, Arizona woman Jacqueline Adis allegedly sent a man over 159,000 texts over a 10-month span. Some of the texts were incredibly disturbing threats like, "I'd make sushi out of your kidneys and chopsticks out of your hand bones. I'd wear your fascia in the top of your skull and your hands and feet." Adis was later arrested for trespassing inside the man's home while he was out of the country, but she was later declared mentally incompetent to stand trial and the charges were dropped. This is the 2,000-year-old skull of Mary Magdalene on display at St. Maximin Basilica in France. It's considered to be one of the most precious relics in all of Christendom. In 2008, 19-year-old Brandon Swanson drove his car into a ditch while driving home from a party. He called his parents and told them he was fine, but wasn't sure exactly where he was. Nearly 50 minutes into the call, he suddenly yelled, "Oh shit," and then went silent. He's never been. In 2003, 28-year-old marine biologist Kirsty Brown became the first known human killed by a leopard seal while she was snorkeling near a research station in Antarctica. Without warning, the seal grabbed her by the head and dragged her beneath the icy water, diving down for several minutes and resurfacing with her body before diving down again several times, eventually pulling her as deep as 230 feet. Her colleagues watched helplessly as the powerful predator treated her like prey, mimicking the way it would typically toy with penguins before drowning them. After holding her underwater for 6 minutes, the seal finally released Kirsty, but despite desperate CPR attempts, she never regained consciousness. In 2012, NYPD officer Gilberto Valli was arrested after his wife discovered he'd been posting on fetish forums about kidnapping, torturing, and eating women, including her. He had detailed abduction plans, photos of real women he said he was targeting, and even searched online for recipes for cooking human meat. The FBI found his chats on a site called Dark Fetish Net, where he discussed taking advantage of his police access to stalk victims. Though convicted in 2013 for conspiracy to kidnap, his conviction was later overturned when a judge ruled the evidence was insufficient to prove intent, calling the chats fantasy roleplay. An appeals court upheld the acquittal, stating that while disturbing, his actions were protected under the First Amendment. Morbid Facts, Part 623. Ezra Miller has a long track record of disturbingly erratic and violent behavior that has deeply tarnished his public image. In 2020, Miller was caught on video choking a woman and throwing her to the ground outside of a bar in Iceland, an act the victim later confirmed was not staged. In 2022, he was arrested multiple times in Hawaii for aggressive outbursts, including lunging at patrons in a karaoke bar and throwing a chair that struck a woman in the head. That same year, Miller was accused of grooming a 12-year-old girl and using drugs, intimidation, and emotional manipulation to control her. He then hosted a woman and her children inside a home in Vermont that was allegedly filled with unattended firearms and marijuana, where one toddler reportedly nearly choked on a bullet. Reports have also surfaced of Miller claiming to be a messianic figure, identifying as both Jesus and the devil. With his career now in shambles, Miller has acknowledged his suffering from complex mental health issues.
Are you a cannibal?
No. You know what you have to do to be a cannibal? You have to have actually eaten someone.
Have you ever eaten any human flesh?
No.
Morbid Facts, Part 439. The career of actor Armie Hammer quickly fell off in 2021 when several women accused him of being an abusive partner and aspiring cannibal. For example, his ex-girlfriend Courtney Vucekovich says their relationship was like dating Hannibal Lecter. She claims he genuinely tried convincing her to remove one of her ribs so that he could barbecue and eat it. In a collection of alleged messages, Armie claimed that he wanted to cut her skin and drink her blood, but that he would stitch her up again so as not to waste a perfect slave. He also wrote about wanting to pounce on her and grape her at knife point while she cried, and wanting to cut off one of her toes to keep a piece of her with him at all times. In response to these disturbing allegations, Armie was quoted saying, "I don't think that's any different than when someone looks at a baby and goes, 'Oh my god, look at those fat little legs, I just want to eat you up.'" Creator of Naruto Masashi Kishimoto endured a grueling work schedule that pushed him to the brink of physical and emotional collapse. He routinely worked up to 20 hours per day, leading to several hospitalizations, and even missing the birth of his own child due to crushing deadlines. By the final arcs of Naruto, he admitted to feeling emotionally numb, simply trying to survive the demands of the series. Writing certain death scenes took a drastic personal toll on him, and he received constant death threats from fans over controversial plot decisions. Much of his work was inspired by feelings of deep isolation and insecurity, stemming from his youth and the constant comparisons to his twin brother. These personal struggles bled into Naruto's themes of loneliness, rejection, and the desperate need for acknowledgement. In 1992, Pepsi launched a promotion in the Philippines called Number Fever, offering 1 million pesos to anyone with the winning bottle cap number, a life-changing prize for most people in the country at the time. On May 25th, the winning number announced was 349, but due to a printing error, over 600,000 caps with that number had been distributed. Thousands of people thought they had won, only to be told their prizes wouldn't be honored, and chaos quickly ensued. Riots broke out, Pepsi trucks were bombed, and at least 5 people were killed, including a mother and her child when a grenade was thrown at a delivery truck. Pepsi offered small consolation payments, but the damage was done. The scandal became one of the most infamous marketing disasters in history, and Pepsi never fully regained public trust in the Philippines. Morbid Facts, Part 622. In 2019, 18-year-old Denali Bremer from Alaska was messaged by a wealthy tycoon named Tyler, who promised her $9 million if she murdered someone and sent him the proof. Convinced the offer was real, Bremer recruited several friends whom she told she would split the money with, and they chose to target 19-year-old Cynthia Hoffman, a developmentally disabled girl who considered Bremer her best friend. The group lured Cynthia on a fake hiking trip to Thunderbird Falls, where they bound her with duct tape and led her to a remote spot. That's when one of the friends shot her in the back of the head while Bremer filmed the murder and sent the footage to Tyler, after which they dumped the body in the river. Authorities uncovered the plot through digital evidence, leading to multiple arrests. Tyler ended up being an unemployed catfisher named Darren Schillmiller who lived in his parents' basement in Indiana. He was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to 99 years in prison, the same sentence handed to Bremer. Morbid Facts, Part 532. Cult leader Amy Carlson, aka Mother God, convinced her followers that she was God, a 19 billion-year-old being, and that she could heal people from cancer with the power of love. Amy claimed she had reincarnated 534 times, with her past lives including Cleopatra, Jesus Christ, Harriet Tubman, and Marilyn Monroe. But Amy's health began to rapidly decline after she herself was reportedly diagnosed with cancer in 2020. She was eventually paralyzed from the neck down and begged her members to take her to the hospital, but they refused, and she ended up dying in April of 2021 at the age of 46. When police were alerted, they found her mummified corpse in a state of decay that suggested she'd been dead for several weeks. It was stuffed in a sleeping bag wrapped with Christmas lights, with the face covered in glitter and both eyes removed. Authorities stated it was a makeshift shrine and ended up charging 7 members of the group with desecration of a corpse. In 1982, renowned actor Vic Morrow and child actors Micah Dinley and Renee Chen were killed on the set of Twilight Zone the movie when a helicopter malfunctioned and crashed during a stunt, decapitating both Morrow and Micah while crushing Renee. The scene involved illegal child labor in unsafe conditions, sparking a high-profile trial against director John Landis, who was ultimately acquitted. The haunting photo on the right shows 7-year-old Renee's grandfather collapsing in grief at her funeral, questioning how this could have possibly happened to his talented young granddaughter. The 1897 Battle of Sarigari is considered to be one of the greatest final stands in history. Just 21 soldiers of the Sikh regiment fought an army of 10,000 Afghans and killed more than 600 of them before being defeated. In Florida, 75-year-old exotic animal enthusiast Marvin Hajos was fatally mauled by his pet cassowary, one of the most dangerous birds on the planet. Authorities believe he tripped and fell near the bird, triggering an aggressive response. The cassowary lashed out with its powerful legs, using its razor-sharp inner claws to slash Marvin's neck and torso apart. The man who had raised exotic animals for decades died en route to the hospital. Morbid Facts, Part 354. According to a 2014 investigation, the car that Paul Walker died in had tires that were 9 years old. This likely contributed to Paul's racer friend losing control while driving around a corner at 93 miles per hour. It's a tragic example of why you should always change your tires after 6 years no matter how much they've been used. Roughly 200 people die on cruise ships each year, especially on those that carry a lot of seniors. So most ships have a small morgue on board prepared to store up to 10 bodies. In 2002, 13-year-old hockey fan Brittany Cecil was sitting in the stands of a Blue Jackets game when a deflected puck struck her in the temple, fracturing her skull. She died just 2 days before her birthday and remains the only fan fatality in NHL history. In November of 2021, zipline instructor Joaquin Romero fell to his death after sacrificing himself to save a customer. He had to let go of the zipline because he knew it would be too heavy to hold both he and his client, so he decided that he would be the one to die. While filming Jackass No. 2, Johnny Knoxville attempted a motocross backflip that went horribly wrong when the bike crashed down handlebars first directly onto his crotch. Knoxville was immediately rushed to the hospital, where doctors discovered the trauma had torn his urethra and partially detached it from his bladder. For the next 3 years, he had to perform painful self-catheterization twice daily to keep the torn tissue from sealing shut. He later described the sensation of pushing a tube through the raw, unhealed tissue as like jamming a knife into an open wound every single day. The risk of infection was constant, and any mistake could have led to permanent urinary dysfunction or worse. In 1912, 4-year-old Bobby Dunbar vanished from his family's tent during a camping trip in Louisiana, sparking a frantic 8-month search. He was eventually found in Mississippi with another family who insisted that he was actually their son, Bruce Anderson. But sadly, the Andersons didn't have the money to fight this in court, so they lost custody of the child. The Dunbars took the boy home and raised him as their son Bobby Dunbar for the remainder of his life. Decades later, in 2004, DNA testing confirmed that the boy they took from the Andersons was not Bobby Dunbar, as the real Bobby Dunbar's fate remains unknown to this day. Morbid Facts, Part 497. In 2018, an English woman was drinking out of a glass with a metal straw when she suddenly fell with the drink in her hand. Tragically, she landed directly on the straw, which punctured her eye socket and went through her brain, killing her almost instantly. For 4 decades, Walter Freeman, the man who made lobotomies popular, had personally performed as many as 4,000 lobotomies on patients as young as 12, despite never being professionally trained to perform surgeries. At least 100 of his patients died from cerebral hemorrhaging. For many years, Beethoven kept his hearing loss a secret since he was afraid that revealing his deafness would ruin his career. He once wrote a note to his brother that he never sent, confessing that he'd been completely deaf since the age of 40, and explaining that it had an immense impact on his social life. Since many people assumed he was antisocial, Beethoven longed for human contact but became a recluse out of shame. All of this resulted in severe depression and made the composer contemplate taking his own life. Morbid Facts, Part 403. Liam Neeson's wife, actress Natasha Richardson, was taking a beginner ski lesson on a bunny hill when she suddenly fell without a helmet on. She initially refused any medical help but complained about a severe headache a few hours later. Richardson was soon flown to the hospital where she died 2 days later from a brain bleed. A park ranger on Rinka Island once sat down in his office and was attacked by a Komodo dragon hiding under his desk. Turns out the cleaner had accidentally left the door open the night before and the massive lizard snuck inside. The ranger received 30 stitches at the hospital and managed to survive, but has since quit his job and now suffers from PTSD. Harvard Law School professor Roger Fisher had an interesting idea to prevent the unjustified launch of nuclear weapons. He proposed implanting the U.S. nuclear launch codes inside a person's body next to their heart, so that the president would have to take a life in order to activate the country's nuclear weapons. In case you need a few reasons to feel thankful for your mom, these are some of the worst mothers of all time. Suffering from severe postpartum psychosis in 2001, Andrea Yates methodically drowned her 5 children one by one in the family bathtub. She believed she was saving them from eternal damnation and was committed to a mental asylum for the rest of her life. Over a 14-year span, Mary Beth Tinning's children kept dying mysteriously, 9 of them in total. The cause of death for the first few was thought to be genetic, but it was later revealed she had smothered most of them to gain sympathy and attention. In 1983, Diane Downs shot her 3 children in cold blood, killing one and paralyzing another, simply because the man she was dating didn't like kids. She then drove them to the hospital slowly while her children were screaming in agony beside her. Blanche Monier's mother imprisoned her in a windowless room for 25 years, simply because she fell in love with a man her family deemed unsuitable. Under her mother's control, Blanche was kept in darkness, starved, and left to rot in her own filth, until authorities discovered her in 1901 weighing just 55 pounds and barely clinging on to life. Between 1996 and 2006, Megan Huntsman secretly gave birth to 7 infants and killed each one immediately after birth, hiding the tiny bodies in cardboard boxes in her garage. Her family discovered them years later and she was sentenced to 30 years in prison. Spanish woman Aurora Rodriguez conceived her daughter Hildegard as an experiment to create the perfect human. Hildegard became a prodigy, reading at age 2, speaking 4 languages by 8, and entering law school by the age of 13. But when she eventually sought independence as an adult, Aurora declared the experiment a failure and shot her daughter in her sleep. She later said the sculptor, after discovering the most minimal imperfection in his work, destroys it. She spent most of her 26-year sentence in a mental asylum. Morbid Facts, Part 604. Juana Barraza, known as the Little Old Lady Killer, was a Mexican professional wrestler who murdered at least 16 elderly women in Mexico City between 1998 and 2006. She posed as a social worker to gain access to her victims' homes, then strangled them, often with cords or her bare hands, and stole their belongings. Her strength and wrestling background, performing under the name the Lady of Silence, made her attacks especially brutal. Panic gripped the city as authorities struggled to solve the case until she was finally caught fleeing a murder scene. Barraza later confessed to deep resentment toward her abusive mother and was sentenced to 759 years in prison. Vlad the Impaler earned his name through the methodical terror he inflicted on his enemies. When the mighty Ottoman Empire invaded his territory in 1462, they were met with a nightmarish sight: a forest of 20,000 impaled corpses mounted on tall wooden stakes and left to rot beneath the scorching summer sun. The victims, captured soldiers, peasants, and anyone who defied Vlad, including children, were arranged with chilling precision, their decomposing bodies spreading a stench of death for miles. Upon seeing this grotesque display, Sultan Mehmed II was so disturbed that he ordered his army of 100,000 men to retreat. Actor Daniel Hovels accidentally slit his own throat on stage during a 2008 theatrical performance after his prop knife was somehow switched out for a real one. The audience initially thought it was all just an elaborate special effect. The blade had just barely missed Hovels' carotid artery, but he was back on stage the next day. The leading cause of death for pregnant and postpartum women in America is homicide. This is often driven by partner violence that is escalated or triggered by the pregnancy, stemming from jealousy, fear of responsibility, and financial stress. In 2014, a crematorium in Virginia caught fire during the cremation of a 500-pound body. The excessive body fat caused the furnace to overheat, igniting the building's roof. A Florida musician known as Prince Midnight constructed a fully functional electric guitar he dubbed the Skelecaster, using the skeletal remains of his deceased Uncle Philip. Philip had donated his skeleton to a medical college in Greece, but after 2 decades, the school no longer had any use for them, so the remains were returned to his family. Prince Midnight decided to honor his uncle, who introduced him to heavy metal music, by turning his ribcage, spinal column, and pelvis into a guitar. In 1987, North Korean spy Kim Hyun-hui blew up Korean Air Flight 858, killing all 115 passengers on board. After failing to take a cyanide pill afterwards, she told interrogators it was a direct order from Kim Jong-il that she had no way of backing out of without being killed. The woman was originally sentenced to death, but later pardoned by the South Korean president, who said she was merely a brainwashed victim of the real culprit, the North Korean government. Hyun-hui ended up marrying one of her interrogators, and they live happily ever after with their 2 children. While recording the audio version of his book Charlotte's Web, it took author E.B. White 17 takes to read the death scene of Charlotte. He's said to have walked outside for a breather, come back in, and started crying again every time he got to that moment. In 1184, the King of Germany was conducting a meeting with his noblemen on the 2nd floor of a church when the floor suddenly collapsed. The king, whose seat was on a separate section that didn't collapse, watched in horror as 60 of his noblemen drowned in the cesspit located below that hadn't been emptied out in years. Morbid Facts, Part 132. Angelina Jolie was once so depressed that she tried to hire a hitman to kill her. She felt that a murder would be easier on her family than if she took her own life. But the would-be hitman talked her out of it by asking her to wait a month and reconsider her decision. The skin of certain fish species can be grafted onto severe burns and diabetic wounds. The material recruits the body's own cells and is eventually converted into living tissue. According to a recent study, people in the US who were born before 1996 have a lower IQ than those born afterwards. This is due to the negative effects of leaded gasoline, which was finally banned completely on January 1st, 1996. In the late 1980s, a woman went on a vacation getaway where singles could meet other singles. She quickly thought she met the man of her dreams and decided to sleep with him that night. But when she woke up in the hotel room the next morning, the man was gone and there was a small wooden coffin on the table next to her. Inside was a note that read, "You are now HIV positive. Welcome to the world of AIDS." In one of the most horrifying cases of human captivity, Joseph Fritzl imprisoned his own daughter Elizabeth in a hidden basement beneath their Austrian home for 24 years, beginning in 1984. He repeatedly tortured and raped her, fathering 7 of her children, 3 of whom were raised in the underground dungeon without ever seeing daylight. The space was initially built as a bomb shelter and had no windows, was soundproofed, and could only be accessed through a series of hidden electronically locked doors that Fritzl installed himself. The monster kept up a front by convincing authorities and his wife that Elizabeth had joined a cult, even forging letters to support the lie. But the case was exposed in 2008 when one of the captive children fell critically ill and was brought to a hospital, prompting an investigation. Fritzl was arrested, convicted of many awful crimes, and sentenced to life in a psychiatric facility. The dungeon was later sealed with concrete, while Elizabeth and her surviving children were placed under new identities. These disturbing facts will completely shatter your perception of time. Joe Biden was born closer to Abe Lincoln's presidency than to his own. If someone born today were sworn in at age 78, the same age Biden was, they would become president in the year 2106. When the microchip was invented in 1958, Belgium was still displaying people from the Congo in human zoos. T-Rex lived closer in time to humans than to the Stegosaurus. Jack the Ripper was actively murdering people, Van Gogh painted Starry Night, the Eiffel Tower was completed, and Nintendo was founded, all in the year 1889. The 10th U.S. President, John Tyler, who was born in 1790, has grandchildren that are still alive today. The last widow of a Civil War veteran just died in 2020. 17-year-old Helen Jackson married 93-year-old James Bolin in 1936 so that she could claim his military pension after he died. And lastly, there are more slaves today than at any point in the history of the world. Macho Man Randy Savage died from a massive heart attack while driving with his wife, as an autopsy later found his coronary artery to be 90% blocked. Just a few days before he died, Randy had a routine checkup with his doctor who suggested a heart scan, which would have easily detected the fatal blockage, but Randy decided to put it off until his next visit. Known as the meteor, this was the result of 5 floors of the World Trade Center being compressed together when the towers collapsed on 9/11. It's not known if there are human remains inside. After failing to assassinate King Louis XV in 1757, Robert Francois Damiens was sentenced to be executed by having his skin ripped open, molten lead and sulfur poured into his wounds, and dismemberment by 4 horses. Upon hearing this, Damiens replied, "Well, it's going to be a tough day." During the execution, Damiens was reportedly still alive after all of his limbs were ripped off, so his remaining torso was burned at the stake. Chandler from Mr. Beast videos suffers from a genetic eye condition called achromatopsia that only allows him to see the world in shades of white, black, and gray. It's a rare form of color blindness where all 3 cone types are completely absent from the eye, resulting in the inability to perceive any colors whatsoever. Scottish guitarist Les Harvey, known for performing with multiple rock bands throughout the 60s and 70s, narrowly escaped death in a fatal car crash in 1965, only to be fatally electrocuted on stage in 1972 after touching an ungrounded microphone. This gravestone is shared by twin sisters Emily and Minnie Dodsworth. Emily lived for just 2 days, while Minnie lived for over 100 years. In 2003, a Houston doctor stepped into an elevator when its doors malfunctioned and suddenly closed on him. The elevator then shot upward unexpectedly before the man could fully enter, instantly severing his head and shoulders while leaving the rest of his body in the hallway outside. A young nurse inside the elevator was physically unharmed but severely traumatized after she was stuck inside the elevator with the doctor's remains for several hours. Morbid Facts, Part 440. 5 days before her wedding in September of 2009, Yale medical student Annie Lee suddenly went missing in the basement of a Yale laboratory. On the actual day she was supposed to get married, her body was found hanging upside down inside a wall cavity in the building. Her murderer, a lab technician who worked in the building, was eventually caught and sentenced to 44 years in prison. After his phone was stolen in 2020, 16-year-old Kevin Bui set a Denver house on fire that he mistakenly thought was the thief's home. The blaze tragically killed 5 members of an innocent family, including 2 young kids. Bui was tried as an adult and sentenced to 60 years in prison. After suffering a stroke in 2010, UK woman Sarah Colwell started speaking with a Chinese accent despite never even visiting China. No matter how hard she tries, Sarah can't return to her normal voice. She became one of less than 100 people to ever be diagnosed with foreign accent syndrome, a rare neurological condition caused by damage to the speech part of the brain. Morbid Facts, Part 554. Ben Wolf, who played Infantata and Meep in American Horror Story, tragically died in 2015 at the age of 34. The 4'4" actor was crossing the street in Hollywood before he was struck in the head by a car mirror when the driver apparently didn't see him. Wolf was rushed to the nearest hospital before succumbing to a resulting stroke. This heartbreaking video shows a zoo bear still walking in circles 7 years after being freed from the small cage she was kept in for 2 decades. In July of 2023, 57-year-old Barry Griffiths suddenly died after accidentally stabbing himself in the stomach while trying to separate 2 burger patties that were frozen. In 2002, 15-year-old Kara Robinson was kidnapped by serial killer Richard Ivanitz and subjected to 18 hours of abuse. But she managed to escape after manipulating Ivanitz to feel at ease and memorize the details of her surroundings before running off. Robinson was then able to give police a detailed description of the home, which allowed them to bring the serial killer to justice. Muppets creator Jim Henson's death was made all the more tragic by how easily it could have been prevented. In May of 1990, he dismissed what seemed like mild flu-like symptoms, unaware that his body was actually under attack by a rare strain of Group A Streptococcus. The bacteria ravaged his lungs, filling them with blood and fluid as he slipped into septic shock. By the time he stumbled into the ER, several of his organs were already shutting down, as doctors described it as being hit by a freight train of bacteria. Despite frantic attempts to save him, Henson died at age 53, 20 hours after arriving at the hospital. Medical experts later said that if he had arrived just a few hours earlier, he likely would have survived. In a chilling discovery, archaeologists have found the first physical evidence of ancient Roman gladiators battling wild animals, an 1800-year-old skeleton in York, England bearing lion bite marks on the pelvis. Excavated from Driffield Terrace, a site believed to be a gladiator cemetery, the remains belong to a man aged between 26 and 35. The bite marks on his pelvis showed no signs of healing, indicating that the injuries were most likely fatal. The gladiator was also found to have been decapitated, either as a ritual practice or mercy killing after the brutal mauling. Morbid Facts, Part 449. In 2012, Donna Summer died from lung cancer at the age of 63, even though she wasn't a smoker. The singer believed it was caused by inhaling the toxic fumes from the Twin Towers after they fell on 9/11, since the dust filled the air around Ground Zero for several months afterwards, and Summer lived nearby. In fact, around 6,400 people have since died from 9/11 related illnesses, more than double the amount that died on the actual day of the attacks. The Dani tribe in Indonesia is known to cut off parts of their fingers after the death of a loved one. In 1928, Alfred Lowenstein, the third richest man in the world at the time, completely disappeared from his private jet in the middle of a flight. After Alfred took too long to use the bathroom, his secretary went in to check on him, but the bathroom was empty and the exit door connected to it was wide open. There have been many theories put forth, but Alfred most likely opened the wrong door by accident and plunged thousands of feet to his death. Morbid Facts, Part 219. In December of 1999, a schizophrenic man broke into George Harrison's home and stabbed him over 40 times. He was only saved when his wife incapacitated the attacker by repeatedly striking him with a fire poker. Harrison's official statement following the attack was, he wasn't a burglar and he certainly wasn't auditioning for the Traveling Wilburys. When 14-year-old Shanna Holloway didn't make her high school cheer team in 1991, her mother Wanda hired a hitman to kill the mother of another girl who made the team over Shanna. Wanda thought the girl would be so devastated by her mother's death that she would end up dropping the team, therefore giving the spot to Shanna. During the American Revolution, a slave named Billy was charged with treason and sentenced to death by hanging. But he argued that as a slave he wasn't a citizen, and therefore couldn't commit treason against a government to which he owed no allegiance. The jury agreed, and with the help of Thomas Jefferson, Billy was eventually pardoned. While working on the Nevermind album, there were concerns that the naked baby on the cover might be considered too inappropriate. In response, Kurt Cobain reportedly joked that he'd slap a sticker over the baby's genitals reading, "If you're offended by this, you must be a closet pedophile." The label was uneasy, but Cobain stood firm in his refusal to change it, turning a potential PR nightmare into one of the most iconic album covers in rock history. Decades later, Spencer Eldon, the nude baby featured on the cover, sued the band in 2021 at the age of 30, claiming that the image constituted child sexual exploitation and caused him lifelong emotional distress. Ironically, Eldon had fully embraced the fame in the past, recreating the photo multiple times, even nude, signing autographs, and getting a Nevermind tattoo. His lawsuit, seeking $150,000 from each defendant, was widely criticized and ultimately dismissed the next year due to the statute of limitations. Dirty facts about history that they'll never teach you in school, Part 22. During McLovin's sex scene in Superbad, actor Christopher Mintz-Plasse had to have his mother present while filming due to legal requirements. The actor was only 17 years old at the time of filming, and California law mandates that a parent or guardian must be on set when a minor is involved in scenes of sexual nature. The U.S. Navy once banned tattoos it considered obscene, leading to a boom of tattoos of nude women on men who didn't want to serve. If they decided to serve later on, they had to have a tattoo artist dress the woman to meet Navy requirements. In 1999, Disney had to recall 3.4 million copies of the children's film The Rescuers because one of the animators inserted a picture of a nude woman into 2 frames of the movie. During the Apollo missions, NASA provided male astronauts with condom-like urination devices available in small, medium, and large sizes. However, due to apparent concerns about personal image, many astronauts opted for the largest size, leading to improper fits and urine leakage. To address this, NASA engineers humorously relabeled the sizes as large, gigantic, and humongous to encourage astronauts to choose the appropriate size. Dirty facts about history that they'll never teach you in school, Part 14. In 1999, police were called to Matthew McConaughey's Texas home after his neighbor reported loud music and disturbances. When they arrived, officers found the actor playing the bongos while blazed out of his skull and completely naked. He was arrested for possession of marijuana. Many historians believe that the crotch part of medieval armor was enlarged not to make the knight's junk look bigger, but to prevent the pain caused by syphilis when their genitals rubbed against the metal. During the Cold War, the CIA highly considered using condoms as a weapon against Russia. They wanted to drop extra-large condoms that were labeled small on Soviet territory to lower their morale, but the plan was eventually scrapped. King Philip V of Spain and his court were known to play a game that translated to the imperturbable. A bunch of naked men would sit around a table covered by a cloth, while a lady underneath the table would put her mouth around one of their willies. The rest of the players would have to guess who was receiving it, and if their guess was correct, the player who was getting socked would have to leave the game. The game was won by the player who could climax without any of the other players noticing. Apparently, this game was very popular among French nobility in the 18th century. In 2006, a team of scientists in Iceland were freezing clams in order to study the effects of climate change. They ended up killing the oldest known animal in the world, a 507-year-old ocean quahog clam named Ming. There are over 70 documented cases of transplant patients experiencing the same thoughts and feelings as their donors did in life. People have reported everything from craving their donors' favorite foods to inheriting their talents. It has posed a theory that the cells in our bodies can store memories. This is what toilets looked like in many medieval castles. There are a few cases of assassins climbing up these poop chutes and waiting for their targets to sit down before killing them. The Burnden Park disaster was a human crush that occurred in 1946 at Burnden Park Football Stadium in England. Overcrowding led to the horrific deaths of 33 people and injuries to hundreds more. The bodies were then left on the sidelines covered with coats, and the game was later resumed and finished with the corpses still on the field. 18 months after colon surgery, an Australian woman returned to the hospital when she was experiencing severe stomach pain. Apparently, the surgeons had accidentally left their scissors inside of her abdomen. An elderly woman from Brooklyn is a hoarder who also happens to be legally blind. At some point in the 1990s, her son who lived in the house suddenly disappeared. In 2016, his fully clothed skeleton was found in a room filled with garbage. She'd unknowingly been living with his corpse for more than 20 years. In August of 1993, 4-year-old Derek Roby had been walking alone to summer camp when 13-year-old Eric Smith lured him into the woods under the guise of showing him a new shortcut. Once they were out of sight, Smith strangled Derek until he was unconscious, brutally smashed his head with a large rock, then poured Kool-Aid into the boy's wounds. Before fleeing the scene, Smith removed one of Derek's shoes and scattered the contents of his lunchbox all around him, creating a disturbing and almost ritualistic display that baffled investigators. The child's body was found later that day, just yards from the park he never made it to. Smith later confessed and was tried as an adult despite his young age, receiving 9 years to life in prison. He was denied parole 10 times over the years, with Derek's family attending each hearing to oppose his release. After 27 years behind bars, Smith was finally granted parole in 2022, sparking debates about whether someone capable of such violence at 13 can ever truly be reformed. This is why you should never trust a pair of twins. Morbid Facts, Part 93. Ever since they were little kids, twins June and Jennifer Gibbons refused to speak to anybody other than each other. They were disturbingly inseparable and seemed to use a private language that only they could understand. By the time the girls turned 18, they had committed numerous criminal offenses and were sent to a high-security mental hospital in 1981. Years before this, they apparently made a long-standing agreement that if one of them died, the other must begin to speak and live a normal life. After 12 years at the asylum, they decided it was time for one of them to die, and Jennifer agreed to make the sacrifice. In March of 1993, Jennifer was taken to the hospital where she soon died from a sudden inflammation of the heart. There was no evidence of drugs, poison, or alcohol in her system. It was almost as if she just died out of nowhere. Afterwards, June said she was finally liberated from her sister and was eventually released from the hospital. She now speaks to others and has lived a relatively normal life ever since. In 2012, a freak accident saved this woman's life in the craziest way possible. 42-year-old Donna Barber was at a family gathering in Arkansas when her teenage son accidentally shot her straight in the neck with a bow and arrow. The arrow pierced the side of her throat just inches from her carotid artery, close enough that she could feel her pulse pounding against the shaft. For a moment, Dawn remained standing in shock before collapsing in a pool of her own blood. As her family screamed in panic, some believing they just witnessed her death, she was rushed to the hospital in critical condition. But during emergency scans, doctors made a chilling discovery. Nestled deep in her neck, not far from the arrow's path, was a cancerous tumor growing in her thyroid. It hadn't caused any symptoms yet, and without the arrow, it likely would have gone unnoticed until it was far too late. Surgeons carefully removed the arrow then the tumor in a single surgery, and Dawn miraculously went on to make a full recovery. Morbid Facts, Part 611. In 2002, New York City bartender Sean Doyle was out drinking with his friend Michael Wright when a drunken argument suddenly broke out after Wright accused Doyle of flirting with his girlfriend. In a fit of rage, Wright threw Doyle down an open manhole and he immediately started screaming in agony from below. The shaft led down to a steam tunnel where a ruptured vent had caused the water temperature to reach an estimated 300 degrees Fahrenheit. Doyle survived the fall and was pleading for help while trapped in the boiling water, but the heat and steam were far too intense for rescuers to reach him. Witnesses reported hearing his screams echoing through the streets like a whistling tea kettle, then abruptly stopping. His body was finally recovered 4 hours later, and the medical examiner later described the scene as one of the worst she'd ever seen. The metal of his belt buckle had partially fused with his pelvis, and steam had filled up his lungs until they completely ruptured. His skin had completely peeled away, and his organs were essentially steamed like a lobster. The details of Chris Brown's 2009 attack on Rihanna are nothing short of disturbing. When Rihanna called out Chris for being unfaithful, an argument ensued that quickly turned violent. Chris pulled over and tried to force Rihanna out of the car, but her seatbelt prevented it. So he slammed her head against the window and punched her in the face so hard that she started spitting up blood. Chris then started driving, but continued to punch Rihanna in the face with his right hand. At one point he told her, "I'm gonna beat the shit out of you when we get home, just wait and see." Rihanna then pretended to call her assistant, telling her to have the police ready for when she gets home. To this, Chris responded, "You just did the stupidest thing ever, now I'm really gonna kill you." He soon put her in a headlock and started biting her ear before applying pressure to her carotid arteries, making her slowly lose consciousness. Rihanna then tried to gouge his eyes in an attempt to escape, so Chris started biting her fingers. Rihanna started screaming for help, causing Chris to exit the car and walk home. Brown was later charged with felony assault and sentenced to 5 years probation. In 2005, Thomas Montgomery, a 46-year-old married man from New York, created an online persona named Tommy, presenting himself as an 18-year-old Marine. Using this catfish, he began an online relationship with a 17-year-old girl from West Virginia named Jessie. But Montgomery's coworker, 22-year-old Brian Barrett, also became involved with Jessie online. When Jessie started shifting her attention to Barrett without him having to catfish her, Montgomery became consumed with jealousy. Eventually, Montgomery ambushed Barrett in their workplace parking lot and shot him 3 times with a military-style rifle, with one bullet piercing his neck as he sat in his car. Tommy was later arrested and pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, receiving 20 years in prison. But the story didn't stop there. In a final shocking twist, it was revealed that the teen girl they'd both been obsessed with was actually a 45-year-old housewife who was using her daughter's photos to catfish men online. Morbid Facts, Part 95. In March of 1995, 33-year-old South Carolina man Terry Cottle took his own life by shooting himself in the throat with a shotgun. After spending 4 days in the trauma unit, Terry's wife Cheryl agreed to take him off life support and donate his organs. His heart ended up going to a 57-year-old man named Sonny Graham who was dying of heart failure. After a successful transplant, Sonny started writing to his donor's wife Cheryl. Over the next 10 years, the two ended up falling in love and eventually got married. Soon enough, people started to notice that Sonny was taking on some of Terry's personality and characteristics. He started liking things that he never enjoyed before, like beer and hot dogs, which were some of Terry's favorites. This isn't exactly uncommon in transplant recipients, as many people have reported taking on the tastes, emotions, and even the memories of their deceased donors. But this was taken to the extreme when 12 years later, Sonny ended up taking his own life the exact same way as Terry did, with a shotgun to the throat. Morbid Facts, Part 536. When Brian Spencer was called up to play in his first NHL game in 1970, he told his father Roy to watch the game that night since he knew he'd be interviewed between periods. But when he couldn't find a broadcast of the game, Roy drove to the nearest TV station in a fury and held the staff at gunpoint, ordering them to broadcast the Maple Leafs game immediately. The station complied, but as Roy was leaving the building, he was confronted by Canadian police and eventually killed after a standoff. The hockey player's life would end up spiraling out of control, as he would also be killed in a shootout after trying to rob his crack dealer. Wow, nice family, huh? During a hunting trip in 1913, race car driver Kamil Janatsky hid behind a bush and made animal noises to prank his friend before he was promptly shot. He was rushed to the hospital but died on his way there, fulfilling his own prediction that he would die in a Mercedes. In 1970, U.S. Air Force pilot Captain William Schaffner was ordered to follow a UFO over the North Sea when he ended up vanishing without a trace. A few weeks later, Schaffner's aircraft was found by divers and recovered from the sea. Strangely, its cockpit was sealed and the ejector seat was intact, but Schaffner's body was nowhere to be found. For decades, people have theorized that the kids show Caillou is about a young boy who died from cancer. This is why Caillou has a bald head, a very small frame, and is always whining as if he's in pain. He constantly acts like a brat right in front of his parents and always seems to get away with it because they're sympathetic to his illness. Every episode also starts out with Granny telling Rosie a story about her brother Caillou, because according to the theory, he passed away before Rosie was old enough to develop lasting memories of him. So the entire show is centered around Grandma filling Rosie in on her deceased brother. Disturbing Fan Theories, Part 6. Ever since Kurt Cobain turned the gun on himself in 1994, fans have speculated that he was actually murdered by his wife, Courtney Love. This was fueled by the fact that Courtney's own private investigator, Tom Grant, who she hired to find Cobain when he escaped from rehab, genuinely believes that she killed Kurt. For starters, Grant notes that Cobain injected himself with such a large dose of heroin before his death that there's no way he would have been able to pull the trigger. Grant also believes Cobain's note was doctored by Love to make it appear as a suicide note. Additionally, there was a lack of fingerprints from Kurt or others at the scene, suggesting that they may have been carefully removed to hide someone else's evidence. Grant also asserts that Love had a financial motive to kill Cobain, considering Kurt was planning to divorce her. Perhaps most shockingly, Kurt Cobain's own grandfather, Leland Cobain, believed that Kurt had been murdered, and he reportedly held this belief for the rest of his life until he died in 2014. Disturbing Fan Theories, Part 1. Drake and Josh came to an abrupt end because Crazy Steve murdered Josh along with his parents and kidnapped Megan. He then fled with her to Seattle, changed their identities, and gave her Stockholm Syndrome, while brainwashing her into believing that they were siblings and their father was lost at sea. Crazy Steve was only crazy as a result of years of being neglected by his own family, but Carly helped fill in this void, allowing Steve to act far more sane while reigniting his passion for art. Crazy Steve also attempted to murder Drake and he survived, but suffered from serious brain damage and amnesia as a result of the attack. This is why when Drake visits Carly in iCarly, he asks her,
"Where's Josh? Where's Mom and Dad?"
Carly triggered the memory of his family, but he couldn't remember what happened to them. Eventually, someone recognizes Carly from her web show, finally prompting the arrest of mass murderer Crazy Steve. This is why Crazy Steve can be seen in a mental asylum in the iCarly spin-off Sam and Cat. Disturbing Fan Theories, Part 2. There's a theory that states Breaking Bad is a sequel to Malcolm in the Middle, but Walter White isn't Hal, he's a grown-up version of Malcolm. For starters, for those who don't know, Malcolm's dad in the show, Hal, is actually played by Bryan Cranston, so it's completely reasonable to assume that Malcolm would grow up to look like him. In the sitcom, Malcolm is very fond of chemistry, and in one episode he even uses a chemistry set to create an explosion. Malcolm is also incredibly smart, stubborn, manipulative, and can develop complex plans just like Walter White. Not to mention, Walter is also estranged from his mother throughout Breaking Bad, alluding to the idea that Malcolm eventually wanted nothing to do with Lois. Additionally, Malcolm's grandfather happens to be named Walter, and he's the only family member who openly appreciates Malcolm's genius. So the theory posits that Malcolm changed his name to Walter as a tribute to his late grandfather, and at some point moved down to Albuquerque to escape from his crazy family. Best known as the original voice for nearly all the female characters in South Park, prolific voice actress Mary Kay Bergman stunned the animation world in 1999 when she took her own life at the young age of 38. Despite her cheerful public persona and thriving career, she was secretly battling severe mental illness, later identified as bipolar disorder and anxiety, which she kept hidden from friends, colleagues, and even her husband, fearing it would damage her career. Mary's sudden death sent shockwaves through the voice acting community, since no one had any idea she was suffering behind the scenes. A poor spider that was posthumously named Lawrence got stuck in this glass and couldn't climb up the smooth surface. So it apparently tried to web its way to the top until its silk ran out and it eventually perished. In 2020, Russian influencer Yekaterina Didenko's 29th birthday celebration at a Moscow pool complex turned tragic when approximately 55 pounds of dry ice were poured into the swimming pool. Intended to create a fog effect, the dry ice produced a massive amount of carbon dioxide gas upon making contact with the water, leading to suffocation and chemical burns among attendees. 3 people ended up dying as a result, including Didenko's husband, who succumbed to his injuries in the hospital. Morbid Facts, Part 366. During the 1980s, Rebecca Schaeffer was the star of the popular CBS sitcom My Sister Sam. But in 1989, she was fatally shot in the doorway of her West Hollywood apartment by an obsessed fan who had been stalking her for over 3 years. The 21-year-old's death led to the passing of some of the first anti-stalking laws in America. This devastating photo was taken by Tom Stoddard during the Sudanese famine in 1998. It shows a well-nourished Sudanese man stealing a bag of corn from a starving child after it was given to him by a charity. Here's a photo of the unidentified victims of John Wayne Gacy being laid to rest at a mass funeral. In 2006, 18-year-old Ryan Waller was shot in the face during a Phoenix home invasion. His girlfriend was killed, but Ryan somehow survived. However, police mistakenly treated Ryan as a suspect, not a victim. Despite a severe bullet wound in his head, Ryan was interrogated for hours and denied medical treatment. He eventually passed away as a result of the horrific negligence. Here are some morbid facts about Martin Luther King. When MLK's grandmother died when he was 12 years old, he blamed himself and tried to take his own life. King would end up suffering from severe bouts of depression throughout his life, even though he was never officially diagnosed. MLK died when he was only 39 years old, but an autopsy found that he had the heart of a 60-year-old, likely due to stress. After King was killed in 1968, his funeral was held at Morehouse College in Atlanta. A small group of students were chosen to be ushers for his funeral, and one of them was Samuel L. Jackson. King's own family publicly supported James Earl Ray's efforts for a retrial. They didn't think he actually assassinated MLK and fully believed it was the U.S. government instead. King's mother, Alberta, was also killed 6 years after her son was assassinated. She was fatally shot by a 23-year-old black man who thought that black civil rights activists and ministers were evil. The man yelled, "You are serving a false god," and shot Alberta with 2 handguns while she was playing on an organ during a church service in Atlanta. Dirty facts about history that they'll never teach you in school, Part 25. According to David Bowie's ex-wife Angela, she once walked in on David and Mick Jagger naked in bed together after a long night of partying. Angela took it as clear evidence of a sexual encounter, though neither Bowie nor Jagger ever confirmed it. Jagger dismissed the rumor as rubbish, while Bowie avoided commenting on it altogether. In the late 1800s, long before the invention of discrete vibrators, early models were massive mechanical contraptions powered by steam, hand cranks, or foot pedals. These devices were used by doctors to treat what was then diagnosed as female hysteria, a vague and outdated condition believed to cause anxiety, irritability, and sexual frustration. Rock Bitch, a provocative all-women British rock band infamous for their wildly sexualized live shows, had a notorious ritual during their concerts. They'd hurl a golden condom into the crowd, and whoever caught it, regardless of gender, was chosen to join them backstage for a night of uninhibited sexual escapades with the band. A 2003 study found that roughly 1 in 200 men globally share a nearly identical Y chromosome, all tracing back to one common male ancestor who lived about 800 years ago in the Mongol Empire region. The researchers linked this genetic legacy to Genghis Khan, giving the timing, geography, and his notorious reputation for spreading his seed like wildfire across his vast empire. Benjamin Franklin reportedly had a big thing for GILFs. He once wrote a long, detailed letter to his friend telling him all the benefits of having an older woman as a mistress. His reasons included, they are more thankful for the attention, they're more adventurous than younger women, they are experienced and need not be trained. He was also very clear that the face ages, but the downstairs does not. 1993, Ron Jeremy played Mario in a corno that parodied the video game franchise. It's called Super Hornio Brothers, and Nintendo owns all the rights. Anton von Leeuwenhoek was known as the father of microbiology. The first thing he ever put under a microscope was his own man milk, which led to his discovery of sperm. Before this, there were some rather questionable theories as to how babies were made, including the belief that trouser gravy contained really tiny humans that were transferred to the woman during intercourse. Anton fully expected to see tiny babies in his population paste. Basketball legend Wilt Chamberlain once claimed that he slept with over 20,000 women, averaging 1.4 women per day for over 40 years. He also admitted that he preferred group sex because he found it far more efficient. While many have questioned the accuracy or practicality of the claim, Wilt stood by it until the day he died, not to brag but to illustrate the emptiness of such a lifestyle, later stating that he would have felt far more fulfilled by deeply loving just one woman. Pop icon Claude Francois, often hailed as the French Elvis, met a gruesome end in 1978 when he tried to fix a flickering light bulb while standing in a bathtub filled with water. The 39-year-old received a severe electric shock that immediately fried his internal organs and stopped his heart. A family preparing to bury a loved one was shocked to find that one of the burial plots they had purchased was already occupied. Despite extensive efforts, no one could determine who the mystery individual was or how they ended up buried there. Rather than exhume the remains, the family decided to let the unknown person rest in peace, marking the grave with a headstone that simply read "Random Person." In the 1960s, the CIA was looking for creative ways to spy on the Russians without being noticed. That's when they came up with the genius idea to use a cat to record Russian conversations. A veterinary surgeon implanted a microphone in the cat's ear and a radio transmitter at the base of its skull. The plan was for the cat to be released near a Soviet embassy and innocuously record any dialogue amongst the men. But after 5 years of research and $20 million in funding, the cat was struck and killed by a taxicab almost immediately. Morbid Facts, Part 349. Here's a 2016 photo of American singer Christina Grimmie hours before she was killed at her own concert. She was signing autographs after performing and was approached by 27-year-old Kevin James Loibel, who didn't say a word. Assuming he was just being shy, Christina opened her arms to greet him with a hug. That's when Loibel pulled out a Glock and shot her 3 times, twice in the chest and once in the head. Police didn't offer a motive for the senseless shooting, but said that Loibel had an extremely unhealthy and unrealistic infatuation with the singer. The purpose of this medical device will make you shiver. It's a restraining device used to immobilize infants during circumcisions. In 1988, skydiver Ivan McGuire was shooting a parachuting lesson from 10,000 feet in the air. Excited to film, he grabbed his camera and jumped from the plane, but soon realized that he made a fatal mistake. Ivan had forgotten his parachute and recorded his final moments before plummeting to Earth. Morbid Facts, Part 194. In 1981, Johnny Cash got into a fight with an ostrich at his exotic animals refuge near his Tennessee home. The incident left Cash with multiple broken ribs and a deep stomach wound that nearly killed him. As a result of the pain pills he was prescribed, he slipped back into a drug addiction years after overcoming them. When Congressman Charlie Wilson was 13, his neighbor Chuck Hazard poisoned his dog by mixing glass into its food. Years later, when Hazard was running for office, Wilson drove 96 people to the polls by telling them how Hazard had killed his dog. Hazard ended up losing by 16 votes. Robert McGowan was sitting in his garage when he was rushed by 4 men trying to steal his car. As he was being beaten, he told them the car keys were in his house, so they quickly ran inside. What they didn't expect to find was the man's 80-pound pit bulls, rescue dogs that nobody wanted, which Robert described as the kindest dogs you'll ever know, but will protect their home and owner with finesse. The dogs sent the men running and stood over their injured owner until help arrived. In 2015, Selena Gomez was diagnosed with lupus, an autoimmune disease that began attacking her kidneys and led to life-threatening complications. By 2017, her condition had worsened to the point where she required a kidney transplant to survive. Her close friend Francia Raisa volunteered to donate one without Selena even asking, and while the transplant initially appeared to be successful, Gomez suffered a serious complication when the new kidney twisted inside her body, cutting off blood flow. Doctors had to perform emergency surgery, using a vein from her leg to construct a new artery to save the organ. The experience left her with lasting physical and emotional scars, and although it deepened her bond with Raisa at the time, their relationship later became strained, reportedly because of Selena's drinking habits following the surgery, which Raisa felt was disrespectful to her and even dangerous, considering the seriousness of the surgery and the need to protect the donated organ. Morbid Facts, Part 507. Martha Stewart once dated Anthony Hopkins but broke it off with him after watching The Silence of the Lambs. She says she couldn't separate Hopkins from his cannibalistic character Hannibal Lecter. RFK's assassin Sirhan Sirhan is still alive today and has been denied parole 17 times. According to historians, we would have a lot more Egyptian mummies intact today if so many of them weren't eaten during the Victorian era. People used to believe that the ground-up corpses of ancient Egyptians could cure different ailments. Harvey Weinstein reportedly had gangrene around his private area, giving his shaft a Frankenstein look that appeared as if it was chopped off and sewn back on. His ghoulies were also removed during treatment of his gangrene, leading to several of his victims suspecting that he was intersex. When Roman Emperor Commodus was in power, he had his men gather all the dwarves and disabled people they could find around the city. They were brought to the Colosseum, where each of them was given a meat cleaver and forced to fight to the death. Morbid Facts, Part 427. In 1998, SNL star and renowned voice actor Phil Hartman was shockingly killed in his sleep by his wife Brynn. She then showed her friend the body, locked herself in a bathroom, and turned the gun on herself. Futurama's Philip J. Fry was named in honor of Phil Hartman, who was supposed to be the voice of Zapp Brannigan before he died. About 50% of panda births result in twins, but panda moms always focus on raising their strongest cub while letting the other ones starve to death. Therefore, zookeepers have to switch the cubs every few hours to trick the mom into caring for both. In 2019, a horrific bungee cord accident caused this Taiwanese man's iris to completely collapse. The father of physics, Max Planck, lived a life that was filled with tragedy. His wife died young, his oldest son died in World War I, his two twin daughters both died while giving birth, and his second son was executed by Nazi Germany because of a failed assassination attempt on Hitler. Baseball legend Mickey Mantle lived much of his life believing he was destined to die young, since most men in his family had died of Hodgkin's disease before their 40s. This belief caused him to develop a self-destructive lifestyle filled with alcoholism, womanizing, and constant risk-taking under the assumption that he wouldn't live past 40. He routinely drank before, during, and after games, eventually destroying his liver to the point of requiring a transplant at age 63. The surgeon who performed the transplant later said that Mantle's body was in as bad a shape as any I've ever seen. Haunted by guilt, depression, and the belief that his family was cursed, Mantle spent his final years seeing visions of dead relatives and publicly warning his young fans not to look up to him. He later said that if he hadn't abused alcohol for so many years, he could have been twice the player he already was. Just before dying of liver cancer and cirrhosis in 1995, Mickey famously said, "If I knew I was gonna live this long, I'd have taken better care of myself." Morbid Facts, Part 635. In February of 1978, 23-year-old college student Stephen Kubacki totally vanished while cross-country skiing near Lake Michigan. His skis, poles, and backpack were found near the lake, and his footprints led onto the ice before abruptly ending, leading authorities to believe he had fallen through and drowned. But 15 months later, in May of 1979, Kubacki reappeared in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, approximately 700 miles away from where he vanished. He claimed to have no memory of the intervening time, stating he woke up in a field wearing unfamiliar clothes and carrying a backpack with maps and other items he didn't recognize. Kubacki never spoke publicly again, and the bizarre case remains unsolved. In 1559, King Henry II of France held a grand jousting tournament to celebrate his daughter's marriage, despite ominous warnings, including a prophecy that he would be pierced through the eye. During the friendly match, a lance splintered on impact, driving a wooden shard through Henry's eye and deep into his brain. Though initially conscious, he soon suffered excruciating pain, seizures, and neurological decline over 10 agonizing days before dying. His gruesome death shocked all of Europe and led to the downfall of jousting in France. This woman went to the absolute extreme just to cheat on her husband. In 2016, California woman Sherry Papini suddenly vanished after going out for a jog. Just as her husband and two little kids were losing hope, 3 weeks later, Sherry was miraculously found alive by the side of a highway. She was tied up with a bag over her head, had a broken nose, was badly emaciated, and covered in bruises. Sherry claimed that 2 Hispanic women had abducted and tortured her, but she was never able to see their faces. The local community quickly rallied behind her, even offering donations to aid in her recovery. But behind the scenes, law enforcement was skeptical of Sherry's claims. They eventually found DNA on her clothing that matched her ex-boyfriend James Reyes, who had no choice but to admit that the story was a complete hoax. Papini had faked a kidnapping, severely beat herself up, and lied to federal agents, all just to spend time with her ex-boyfriend without her family finding out. Her husband divorced her the day she was arrested, while she was sentenced to 18 months in prison in order to pay $300K to the state. Gary Coleman became a massive star as a child on Different Strokes, earning him millions, but his parents and business advisor embezzled most of his fortune over the years. Once he turned 18, he sued them and won a measly $1.3 million settlement, by which point his career had faded and the medical bills were racking up. As an adult, Coleman struggled financially and battled constant health issues from congenital kidney disease, the condition that resulted in his 4'8" height due to the medications used to treat it when he was a child. His final years were marked by bitterness toward Hollywood and especially his parents. He once said, "If I had the choice, I wouldn't be famous. I'd be a happy, healthy, regular guy." When he suffered a fatal brain hemorrhage after a bad fall in 2010, Coleman had written in his will that he wanted no funeral, no wake, and that his parents should not be informed about or allowed to attend any memorial services held in his honor. Morbid Facts, Part 639. While filming in Atlanta in 2023, Jamie Foxx suffered a sudden life-threatening stroke brought on by a brain bleed. The exact cause was never publicly revealed, fueling widespread speculation. Foxx blacked out for 20 days and required emergency brain surgery to save his life. When he finally woke up in a wheelchair, unable to walk or speak, doctors warned him this will be the toughest year of your life. Foxx later described seeing a terrifying hot tunnel and admitted he came within inches of death. He had to relearn basic functions and now calls the experience a brutal reminder of life's fragility. In 2010, 24-year-old Australian woman Phoebe Hanjuk was found dead at the bottom of a trash compactor after somehow plunging feet first down a narrow 12th-floor garbage chute. Experts argued the act would have been virtually impossible without assistance, yet her death was ruled accidental and no one was charged. In 2010, a woman tried to smuggle a live, drugged-up tiger cub through a Bangkok airport, hidden inside her checked suitcase among several plush toy tigers. Security only discovered it when an x-ray revealed bones and a tiny beating heart among the pile of lifeless toys. The cub, barely hanging on to life, was rescued and later rehabilitated by a wildlife protection center. Morbid Facts, Part 477. In 2016, a man who'd been continuously stalking Miranda Cosgrove apparently plotted to murder her. For 3 days, the stalker had been burying various weapons in Cosgrove's backyard, including knives and a rope. One day, he spent hours pacing around the area and eventually shot at a woman who looked like the iCarly actress. The man then performed self-immolation before turning the gun on himself right in Cosgrove's yard. Miranda has stated that she still lives in the same house but refuses to stay there alone ever since that traumatic incident. Earlier this year, inmates at a Miami prison managed to birth a child without ever even meeting each other face to face. 23-year-old Joanne DePaz and 29-year-old Daisy Link, both imprisoned for separate murder charges, started talking to each other through the air vents before falling in love and eventually wanting kids. Using a makeshift line made out of bedding, they passed Joanne's erectoplasm through the vents, while Daisy used a yeast infection applicator to inseminate herself. Against all odds, the plan worked, and the baby was born healthy. The pair are now in different prisons, while Joanne's mother is raising their baby girl. While filming The Wolf of Wall Street, Martin Scorsese originally planned for Margot Robbie's character Naomi to wear a robe during a seduction scene. But Margot insisted on performing the scene naked, arguing that it was more authentic to Naomi's character. She later explained that her body is the only form of currency in this world, and felt the nudity was essential to conveying that dynamic. Scorsese didn't argue with her decision, recognizing that it served to the story. King Tut is the only mummy from ancient Egypt known to have been purposely mummified with an erection, which was accidentally broken off soon after his mummy was discovered. If you had to take a dump back in ancient Rome, forget about privacy. Public latrines contained toilets that were lined side by side with no dividers, as these bathrooms were often social hubs where people would gossip while doing their business. Some latrines could seat over a dozen people at a time, elbow to elbow, making communal defecation a totally normal and accepted part of daily Roman life. Once they were done dropping some cargo, they also had to wipe themselves with a sponge on a stick that everyone shared. Dirty Facts About History That They'll Never Teach You in School, Part 27. In July of 1991, Paul Rubens, famous for playing Pee Wee Herman, was arrested in Florida after undercover detectives caught him masturbating inside of an adult movie theater during a sting operation. The scandal caused public outrage as his hit children's show was pulled off the air and Pee-wee merchandise was yanked from stores. But just months later, Rubens made a bold surprise appearance in character at the 1991 MTV Video Music Awards, where he received a standing ovation before cheekily asking the audience, "Heard any good jokes lately?" The moment became iconic, helping to restore his public image despite the silly controversy. In ancient Greece, men had to go to the gym completely naked. These spaces were exclusively for men, and exercising in the nude was meant to promote the appreciation of the male physique as a tribute to the gods. Back in the 1940s, Walt Disney Studios had an exclusive men's-only lounge called the Penthouse Club reserved for their top animators. Tucked away on the rooftop, it featured a private patio where many of the artists enjoyed sunbathing in the nude. But the tradition came to an awkward halt when word got out that nuns from a neighboring hospital had been peeking at them. Dirty Facts About History That They'll Never Teach You in School, Part 14. In 1999, police were called to Matthew McConaughey's Texas home after his neighbor reported loud music and disturbances. When they arrived, officers found the actor playing the bongos while blazed out of his skull and completely naked. He was arrested for possession of marijuana. Many historians believe that the crotch part of medieval armor was enlarged not to make the knight's junk look bigger, but to prevent the pain caused by syphilis when their genitals rubbed against the metal. During the Cold War, the CIA highly considered using condoms as a weapon against Russia. They wanted to drop extra-large condoms that were labeled small on Soviet territory to lower their morale, but the plan was eventually scrapped. King Philip V of Spain and his court were known to play a game that translated to the imperturbable. A bunch of naked men would sit around a table covered by a cloth, while a lady underneath the table would put her mouth around one of their willies. The rest of the players would have to guess who was receiving it, and if their guess was correct, the player who was getting socked would have to leave the game. The game was won by the player who could climax without any of the other players noticing. Apparently, this game was very popular among French nobility in the 18th century. In 1991, Eric Clapton's 4-year-old son Connor was visiting his mother's apartment in a New York City skyscraper. The building was undergoing maintenance, and a janitor left a window open without a safety guard on the 53rd floor. While playing, Connor ran toward the window, which was floor to ceiling, and fell 49 stories to his death. Despite the negligence, no criminal charges were filed against the worker responsible. At the time, Eric had just begun to build a relationship with Connor after years of struggling with addiction. Completely devastated, Clapton channeled his grief into writing Tears of Heaven, one of his most popular songs to this day. In 2018, a man was riding an escalator in a New York City subway station when his oversized sweatshirt suddenly became caught in the machinery. As the escalator continued moving, the fabric began to tighten around his neck. By the time help had reached him, he'd already been strangled to death by his own clothing. In 2018, Brad Lewis leaped from a 13-foot-high balcony to grab his 2-year-old son who had fallen while chasing a toy. Lewis cradled the boy midair, taking the full impact on solid concrete. He suffered a fractured skull, brain injuries, and a broken vertebrae, while his son survived with only minor injuries. Morbid Facts, Part 571. In 2016, Star Trek actor Anton Yelkin died in a freak accident at the young age of 27. After pulling into his driveway in his Jeep Grand Cherokee, Yelkin went to check his locked gate for mail when the car suddenly rolled back down the driveway and pinned him against a pillar connected to the gate. It's unknown how long it took for the actor to pass, but he was found dead by friends hours after he failed to arrive at rehearsal, and the official cause of death was blunt traumatic asphyxia. Yelkin's particular car model had a known design flaw that confused drivers about whether it was properly in park, and was later recalled due to faulty gear shifters. If you think you have high cholesterol, this guy will make you feel a lot better, or should I say, a lot butter. A Florida man in his 40s followed an extreme carnivore diet for 8 months, consuming nothing but beef, butter, and cheese. He often ate entire sticks of butter and several pounds of cheese each day, causing his total cholesterol to skyrocket to over 1,000 milligrams per deciliter, while anything over 200 is considered high. As a result, he developed painless yellow cholesterol nodules on his palms, elbows, and the soles of his feet. Despite this, the patient said he felt great following the diet, and was able to lose weight while significantly improving his energy levels and mental clarity. With Casey Anthony now on TikTok, let's recap why she's so awful. In July of 2008, Cindy Anthony reported her 2-year-old granddaughter Kaylee missing, claiming she hadn't seen her in more than a month. The toddler's mother, Casey, had told various lies about Kaylee's whereabouts, before eventually admitting that she hadn't seen her daughter for weeks, during which time she'd been out partying. 5 months later, Kaylee's remains were found near the Anthony home with duct tape around the skull, and Casey was charged with first-degree murder. During her trial, prosecutors alleged that Casey wished to free herself from parental responsibilities and killed her daughter by drugging her and duct taping her nose and mouth. The defense otherwise argued that Casey simply suffered from pathological lying and that Kaylee's death was accidental. To the disbelief of millions across the country, Casey was soon acquitted of the murder charge, but found guilty on providing false information to law enforcement. She was released after serving just 3 years in prison and remains free to this day. It's worth noting that years after her trial, it was revealed that the day before her daughter died, Casey Anthony had searched foolproof suffocation methods on Mozilla Firefox. But police overlooked this crucial evidence because they only checked her search history from Internet Explorer. In the past year, Casey has reportedly been having an affair with a father of 2, ruining his marriage of 20+ years. Upon being confronted about the home wrecking, Casey reportedly responded, "I'm living the life I want." In 2021, YouTuber Jordan Cheyenne uploaded a video titled "We Are Heartbroken" about she and her son's puppy being diagnosed with parvovirus, a highly contagious and potentially fatal disease. But the video quickly went viral for the wrong reason. She forgot to cut out a disturbing moment where she forcefully tells her visibly upset son to cry for the thumbnail.
So, if you could pray for us, we appreciate it. I love you guys. Bye. Come here. Come closer for the video. Come closer. Come closer. Come closer. Put your head right here. Come closer. Closer down. Put your head down here. Act like you're crying. Really quick.
I am crying.
Go like this.
No, Mom, I'm actually seriously crying.
No, I know, but go like this for the video. Go like this. Put one hand up. Go like this. No, go like this. Put your hand like this. But let them see your mouth. Let them see your mouth.
No, Mom, I'm actually crying.
Look at me. Look at me. Look at me. Look at me. Look at me.
I'm actually crying.
I know. Look at me. Look at me. Look at the camera. Look at the camera. Okay. It's okay. It's okay. It's over. It's over. It's over.
The footage quickly sparked widespread outrage for obvious reasons. Cheyenne deleted the video, issued a public apology, and claimed she would no longer include her son in future videos. She then took a break from YouTube, returning 5 months later with a tone-deaf comeback video focused more on how the scandal affected her life. Many criticized her for playing the victim instead of taking real accountability for exploiting her child's distress. Morbid Facts, Part 268. In 1992, Native American couple Arnold Archambault and Ruby Bruguier were involved in a car crash at a South Dakota intersection, but they quickly fled the scene before help arrived. Ruby's cousin Tracy was found in the flipped-over car, claiming the couple took off without saying a word. After an extensive search, their whereabouts remained a total mystery, until 3 months later when their bodies were found near the crash site in a ditch that had been searched many times before. Strangely, their bodies were in drastically different states of decomposition, and they were wearing the same clothes as the night of the crash, except Ruby's glasses and shoes were missing. The FBI closed the case in 1999 upon finding no evidence that a crime had been committed, and stated that the cause of death was undetermined. Local authorities believe the bodies were placed there after they died somewhere else, possibly at different times. But regardless, the bizarre case remains a total mystery to this day.